From the very first moments of human creation, architecture existed. Where shelter was one of the basic human needs, exactly like food. And with the emergence of religious beliefs, a new need for the human being appeared.
The need for places of worship. So, they began to build huge structures, so that man could feel how tiny he is in the presence of God.
And that was in different ancient civilizations.
In the Middle Ages, cathedrals also became a symbol of city domination and control.
As one of the most prominent cities, London needed a fitting cathedral. As a centerpiece at the highest point of the city. It was St. Paul's Cathedral.
And now, we are going to present a summary of this fabulous church's history. Cathedral timeline.
401 Romans leave, Anglo-Saxons arrived. 604 First church begun.
The first church was built by the East Saxons, who would have been just recently Christians.
842 Vikings invasion.
The previous church was burned down and another church was built, but it was destroyed by Vikings.
1066 Normans invasion.
The Normans built a new church after their invasion from France, and this church survived until the 17th century. At that point it wasn't really in a good shape, due to the English Civil War. When the monarchy was restored and Charles II took the throne, he wanted to see this church restored to express his authority as a king.
Christopher Wren, he was at that time a professor of astronomy at Oxford University, scientist and mathematician.
The king called on Sir Christopher Wren to restore the church and rebuild some parts of it.
He had a difficult choice to make. He could save time and money if he built on the old foundations, which had already compressed the ground. But his new design was a different shape, and he would have to adapt it, which for Wren was out of the question. Wren decided to dig new foundations. The old foundations would have to be broken up. Any hard areas left behind might affect the cathedral's stability. He examined the ground and found layers of clay and sand. He decided to build on the clay, believing it would offer a more stable base than sand. Wren didn't yet know it, but his choice of foundations was to have dramatic consequences for his cathedral. Wren decided to tailor the cathedral plans to something close to the original great model. The warrant design, approved by the Commission, became architectural history. Wren's new plan was another compromise, using the great model as an inspiration, but like the warrant design, it could be built in stages. Making any changes to the warrant design was a gamble, but Wren believed he could create room for maneuver.
Although Wren was asked to supply designs for rebuilding and restoring this church, there was a great cataclysmic event that allowed him to entirely rebuild it.
Ending in the apocalyptic 666 would be a year full of dread. A violent and unseasonal easterly gale fanned the blaze, and 93 churches. As the firestorm engulfed London's magnificent Gothic cathedral on Ludgate Hill, fears of an impending apocalypse intensified.
Wren believed in the symbolic power and with majesty of the dome and would build the first great dome in England. St. Paul's Cathedral features an innovative triple dome structure. On the circular drum, the inner dome rises and is visible from the cathedral interior. Above this inner dome, a brick cone rises to support the 850-ton lantern.
Turn.
This brick cone also supports the wood rafters and frame of the outer dome, which is covered in wood and lead. This three-dome system allows the cathedral to support such a heavy lantern, all the while maintaining the great height needed to be a visible London landmark.
A 18-foot flat bed frame contained the clock movement. Originally manufactured and installed by John Smith and Sons in 1893. Incorporating a design of escapement by Edmund Denison Beckett. Electronic winding system designed and installed by Smith of Derby Limited in 1969. Plans for the tower were done 1685 to 1710.
As early as 1716, a contract for a new clock with Messrs. Wright and Street was initiated. They began the project in 1717, but 2 years later had discovered what the wind from the Thames could do to a clock in such an exposed condition. In 1719, the commissioners ordered panels installed in the vacant holes in order to keep out the weather. By 1720, Wright and Street's account was settled for £500 plus Bradley's old clock. The clock tower was restored in 1815.
In 1892, plans are made for a new clock which was installed by John Smith and Sons of Derby, an 8-day clock, and the weights were hung down the center of Wren's geometrical staircase, until 1969 when it was converted to electrical auxiliary winding.
A wood and lead roof structure visible from the cathedral exterior, and it is of height 85 meters. An 850-ton stone lantern and cross, whose weight is carried to the ground via the middle brick cone 111 meters.
Wren's design attempted to employ a classical portico as at Val de Grace, but rising through 2 stories and supported on paired columns. The remarkable feature here is that the lower story of this portico extends to the full width of the aisles, while the upper section defines the nave that lies behind it. The Corinthian columns also feature the head of St. Paul. Corinthian column, the slenderest and most ornate of the three classical Greek columns, including tallest base of the three classical Greek orders. Corinthian capital, ornate capital decorated with 2 rows of acanthus leaves, volutes, and a fleuron in the middle of the abacus atop the capital. Corinthian shaft, slender fluted shaft, 24 flutes, Roman Corinthian order. The main difference is that Romans used smooth, as opposed to fluted, shafts. On top of the pediment is a statue of St. Paul, the patron saint of the City of London, the saint to whom this church is dedicated. It is rather unusual to have a cathedral named after a saint. Usually in this country a cathedral takes the name of the city in which it is located. In the New Testament, St. Paul began his life as Saul before his conversion to Christianity on the road to Damascus.
The original St. Paul's Cathedral clock was installed in 1893 and is as reliable today as it ever was. The clock incorporates a weight-driven mechanism with gravity escapement designed by Edmund Denison Beckett, which is similar to the one used on Big Ben in 1895.
In December 1706, Francis Bird carved the Conversion of St. Paul. This contained 8 large figures, 6 whereof on horseback and several of them. The triangular recessed space forming the center of a pediment, typically decorated, found in almost all styles of architecture, classical Greek and Roman architecture, and in derivatives from the Renaissance onwards.
The left-hand tower, the west front of St. Paul's, is crowned by 2 clock towers, each of which has a gilded copper pineapple perched on top. However, only one of the towers, the southwest tower, only the one on the right, actually has a clock face. That clock is known as Big Tom, 16 feet in diameter and with a minute hand longer than the height of a human being. The left-hand tower contains a further 12 bells.